Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we are going to take a look at another Dinomania figure, and this time it is their second Carnotaurus. I have previously looked at a Carnotaurus from them in the past. This is the other version that they do have available. The first version I felt like was a little bit off the wall, kind of crazy looking. This one, the head sculpt does actually look a good bit more like a Carnotaurus. And the last one, did, is just like a crazy type of a Carnotaurus. So this one looks a little bit better, a little bit less crazy. It must be the more normal cousin of the last Carnotaurus we've looked at. And overall, it's definitely a pretty cool, almost vintage-looking Carnotaurus. He stands quite nicely, actually, but with the tail dragging on the ground, sort of tripod pose. So I do like that about the figure, because I like having very old-school, vintage-looking figures. I think you could probably stand him with his tail up off the ground and make him look a little bit more up-to-date and comfortable, but at the same time, I don't know how well he would stand if I did that. But looking at the figure here at first glance, it does look really quite nice, very cool. So let's go ahead and get a closer look at it right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt, you can see some really nice scale work going on the head sculpt of the Carnotaurus. Beautiful, very small scales all over the place up here on the head sculpt of the Carnotaurus, as well as some larger kind of osteoderms poking up here and there, which look really cool. So the actual detailing here, as far as the skin texture goes on the head of our Carnotaurus, does look quite nice. You can also see the horns up there, those trademark Carnotaurus horns, sculpted quite beautifully, honestly. They also have some nice detail within that is brought out beautifully with a nice dark wash, like you tend to find most times on the Dinomania figures. You can see the nostrils sculpted out up here. Nice appearance as far as sort of like scoots up above the eye and the eyebrow area. You can see the teeth are a bit of an off-white coloration, so they're fairly realistic looking as far as the coloration goes. And they are painted actually with a gloss coat, with a glossy type of a paint, so they do shine quite a bit. They look a little sloppy as far as the paintwork goes, but at the same time they don't look terrible either. You can see the inside of the mouth has a very nice tongue sculpted out, as well as the detail on the upper side of the mouth looks quite nice. Nice pinkish coloration in there. And again, you can kind of see it shining a little bit, as they do include a gloss in the mouth as well, just to give it a nice, very realistic appearance. You can actually also sort of see like the gum line here following the teeth, which is pretty cool as well. The eye itself is a kind of a plastic or glass eye type of an effect, with a nice black eye. There's no color or anything included to the eye, just black, but it looks really cool. And due to it having that kind of glass eye effect, you can see it shining in the light quite realistically. So another huge plus to the Dinomania figures is that most times they usually include that kind of glass eye type of a look. Looking up here at the top of the head, you have kind of like some scoots and stuff that run along the top of the head. You can also see some nice color variation as it goes from that lighter brown up here to the top with a darker brown, and you can also see that darker brown running into the horns as well, so that looks really cool. As we start to move down the neck, you can see some very large ridges that pop up all over the Carnotaurus's neck, and you can also see some nice scale work going on. As we move down, you can see up here it's kind of bigger scales, and then as we get into the neck and we move down the body, you can see it kind of turn into a little bit of a finer scaling, and it gets really small the further down the neck into the throat you go. And once you get to the underside of the neck, it's more of just like a skin textured type of a look and not so much a scaly type of a look. You can also see lots of creases as you run down the neck of the Carnotaurus. As we get down here into the body, you can now pick up the shoulder blade there a little bit. You can also see again those ridges continue to run the length of the Carnotaurus, and you can also see the nice scaling as well as some osteoderms poking up here and there. Some pretty nice skin folding going on here in the stomach region. The arms, of course, are not exactly what you would consider accurate for a Carnotaurus. They're a little bit too big, and they actually have kind of like some ridges or osteoderms poking off the back of the arm. You can see that the hands have a pretty nice sculpt as far as the detail goes. There's no real nail paint or anything, or at least not that I can tell. Looks like it's all the same color as the hand, but it looks pretty decent for the most part. I think this Carnotaurus and the last Carnotaurus, they might have used like the Disney's Carnotaurus as kind of like the inspiration for the model and everything, because you can really see that it has like a very similar look in certain aspects. There are definitely quite a bit of differences, but it sort of seems like that was kind of the inspiration for the figure. As you move back here into the leg, you can see that these thighs are actually pretty chunky. They're definitely big, and there's also lots more of these kind of ridges and sort of osteoderms that come off the back of the leg, as well as even down here onto the calf. And you can see nice scales throughout, and again some osteoderms poking up here and there, some nice creasing going on in certain areas. You can also see the kneecap there. As we move down into the foot sculpt does actually look quite nice, and it's kind of trying to block that out because of the light. So the Carnotaurus is a very large figure. You should probably already be able to tell that. So it's a little hard to actually get it into frame and see exactly how nice the sculpt is at certain times without blocking the light. But you can again see that that is definitely a nice foot sculpt as far as that Carnotaurus goes. Nice nails sculpted out there. They are not painted, it seems. They do actually sort of appear to be painted with like a little bit of a lighter coloration, but it's not too far off. The dew claws are present back there, which is nice to see. And then moving up here into the back, again, more detailing up here as far as the skin texture and creasing and ridges go. And then we move out into the tail, and you can see that that tail looks quite nice as far as those scales go. As we continue to move down the tail, you have a little bit of almost like a crocodilian type scaling here on the underside, which is quite different from what we had seen up in the throat. So it does transition as we move down the body. You can see it's more of like a skin texture. And then once we get to the tail, it has like a sort of like a crocodilian type scaling. And then once we get out to here, it turns into more of like a ridges type of a look on both the upper side and the lower side. Again, sort of similar to the Disney's Dinosaur Carnotaurus. And there's like a transition between the two right here as it turns into a different type of like a skin texture and appearance to the tail. But overall, it's definitely a pretty cool Carnotaurus figure, and any Carnotaurus I can get is probably going to be a pretty cool Carnotaurus if you ask me. The only real weird issue with the Carnotaurus that I can see is the legs are kind of like extended out from the body, but it's not too bad. It just gives the appearance of the hips a little bit of a weird look. I mean, they had to connect the legs one way or another. It's just the way it works, especially with this style of a figure with like a squishy, softer type of a figure. You do clearly have to connect the legs, and to have them articulated like that, they're kind of going to have a seam at some point. It's just, I think it's a little bit of a wider seam than we get on most of the Dinomania figures. But other than that, again, it's a pretty darn nice looking Carnotaurus. Not accurate, of course, but at least it's a very cool kind of an ode to the Disney's Dinosaur Carnotaurus. You're not really going to see much difference or anything on this side as far as the sculpt goes, because usually this type of a figure is in like a completely neutral position when you have the articulation, so you're not really going to see much difference, but it does look quite cool on both sides. I can definitely say that for sure. Pretty darn cool Carnotaurus from Dinomania. Now this figure is quite large, so getting a size will be a bit of a problem to have it visually shown here in the review, but if we go ahead and get it from the tail, we'll just keep it up here at the top of the head. You can see it's about 2 feet in length, so about 24 inches or 61 centimeters. And then if we go for a height to the top of the horn there, you are looking at about 14 3/4 inches or about 37 and a half centimeters, somewhere in that range. And I apologize if that was a bit shaky, but for a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Dinomania Carnotaurus. And you can definitely see next to these figures that this is a very large Carnotaurus, and you can really tell that now as I pan up just how much taller it is, and overall the size is just massive in comparison to these figures. Probably the largest Carnotaurus that I have in my collection, I would say, would be this version right here. And hopefully if you have any of these figures, you'll definitely have a good idea, again, of what the size is of this quite large Carnotaurus. So this Dinomania Carnotaurus is definitely quite an awesome figure. It's again not the most accurate Carnotaurus, it's not the most up-to-date version, but as far as kind of displaying sort of a Disney's Dinosaur type of a look, kind of. I mean, there are some areas that look kind of Disney's Dinosaur inspired, but then there are also other areas that definitely do not at all. But overall, I think it has like a very cool vintage feel for a Carnotaurus, almost exactly what I would have expected a Carnotaurus to look like when I was younger, just because it has that really cool tail dragging type of a look, and overall just looks like a large kind of vicious looking monster with the way they've portrayed it here, almost like a movie monster style of a Carnotaurus, and I really do quite like it. It's a nice breath of fresh air to have something so different, kind of old school looking. I think you could probably get the tail up off the ground. I mean, you could definitely do it. I don't know how well it would stand, but I actually quite like it more, I think, with the tail dragging on the ground. I think it almost perfectly represents that tripod position with the way it balances really well, and just the overall beauty of the figure. It's definitely a really cool appearance for this kind of vintage Carnotaurus, and you don't see too many versions of an old school Carnotaurus. It's one figure that, as far as that kind of old school look goes, we don't ever really get to see, so it's nice to see one here made by Dinomania. And the overall detailing of the Carnotaurus is also really quite nice. It is definitely pretty highly detailed, beautiful scale work all over the figure, nice detailing in general on this Carnotaurus, lots of osteoderms, kind of ridges that run along the back, kind of something that you tend to see often associated with Carnotaurus. And then just in general, the really nice detailing and appearance of the figure is quite beautifully done. And a lot of it is nicely brought out with a very nice dark wash, which is always awesome in the Dinomania figures, to always have that kind of dark wash that brings all their detail out and makes their figures look a bit more lifelike than they would otherwise. You can also see that the paintwork of the figure is nicely done with quite a few different variations of browns. You have a really nice dark brown, and then as it transitions down into the body, it turns into a lighter brown, and then once you get to the underside, it's almost like a khaki type of a color, or like a very light, sort of like a yellowish brown sort of mixture. It's a really nice look for the figure, and I think the paint job is quite nicely done as well. All the paint looks very natural on the figure overall, very nicely applied, and genuinely does look like body color as opposed to paint. The figure also has some pretty decent articulation, but not too much. You have articulation in both the arms and legs, nothing really more than that, but you can also move the mouth, of course, and the body and tail in general, just because it has that softer feel to the figure, so it does articulate without actually having articulation due to it being softer and kind of squishy, so you can move the Carnotaurus around quite nicely. And then you have the inclusion of those kind of glass eyes, those black eyes up there on the head of the Carnotaurus, which look really cool as well, giving again that little bit extra amount of realism to the figure. So this is a really, really nice Carnotaurus from Dinomania, and I actually quite like this one more than the last one even, which I like the last one quite a bit. So if you would like to pick this up, I will include a link in the description for you to head straight to this listing on the Dinomania website, where you can buy this for yourself. So make sure you head down there, check the description, buy the very cool Dinomania Carnotaurus, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.